Hi, it's Dre Griggs with Obsidian Wisdom. Today we'll be talking about the stock market, the correction, how it looks as far as Ukraine and Russia, and just how you can make decisions when it comes to your retirement portfolio and what makes the most sense for you in these times. Most entrepreneurs and families worry about money, so we created the Wisdomites framework to help you eradicate financial stress, generate a passive income, and build a prosperous retirement strategy. So if you've been paying attention in the stock market, you've noticed that we lost about 167 points today. That's about 0.5%. And if you put that with the overall downturns that you've been seeing as far as January and February are concerned, then we're getting into what's called the correction. Probably a lot of inflation baked into this. There's a lot of maybe sentiment baked into this cake. When will it make a correction? I don't really think some of these companies are necessarily worth what it's showing. And so you start to wonder, should I keep my money in the stocks? What decisions should I be making? So when it comes to figuring out if the 167 point drop that we just saw today, if it makes sense for you to pull your money out, realistically speaking, it's always good to understand what it is that's affecting the overall drop in the market, what's affecting what sectors are being impacted, because even though the market as a whole drops 167 points, it's not that every single stock, every single sector lowers. So as you understand what is causing some of these changes, then you can see whether it makes sense for you to maintain some of the overall decisions that you have in your diversification. So, for example, if you noticed, anyone that's messing with the Russian currency, the ruble, those dropped 30% in relation to the US dollar. And that is directly related to the sanctions that the European Union and the United States and other countries have all agreed to enact against Russia. So now if you're saying, okay, well, if I had a ruble, what would I do with it? Well, I would find some other currency to move my money to. And that's what a lot of Russians are doing, right? If you're telling me that you're going to kick out some of our banks out of SWIFT, and I'll make a separate video that talks about just what SWIFT is, and you're going to give us different sanctions, well, I'm worried that my money is not going to be worth anything. And that's a fair concern to have. So where do you move your money? Well, you'll notice that Bitcoin is up almost 10% on the day. So if you're a Russian citizen, because there's so many people trying to transfer their money. And the same holds true with the Ukrainian money, right? If you're worried that your government is going to be toppled over from a Russian occupation, well, what's the chance of you keeping your Ukrainian currency? Again, that is going to also negatively impact certain industries. Like you'll see when it's coming to just like financial industries where people are like, well, are the other banks and financial institutions, if you are not allowed to interact with Russian banks, won't that make some of the money that you have less valuable? Won't it mean that some of the customers that you currently have won't be able to be your customers anymore, or at least for the time being? So then you'll notice different Bank of Americas and Chases and different financial institutions where their stocks are decreasing because people aren't sure if you're going to give Russian economic sanctions, how does that impact these different banks? Because these different banks, they borrow money from each other, they lend to each other, their customers interact with each other, and it is a customer base to have Russians, right? These banks are in different countries. So if you're saying that we're no longer allowed to take money from the different Russian citizens in the banks, well, that means that the customer pool of the banks are lower. So people are worried about that. And that really leads you into the overall 167 point drop. And what I mean is, what people are really concerned is if we're in this global economy and everyone is connected to everyone else, does that mean are we like cutting off our nose to spite our face, right? The question is, if you are creating economic sanctions against Russia, will that ultimately create issues for the European Union? And then because of the European Union having issues, will it create issues in the US? And if the US has issues, won't that end up causing a global economic catastrophe, right? Where we're talking about the 2008 recession again, or you're talking about things like COVID, where it's like a global impact because we are very connected. And the truth is, we don't know, right? That's really what the truth is. Now, most people are growing more comfortable where they're saying, you know what? The impact of the Russian economy and the sanctions is not going to affect all of the US industries the same way. It's not going to really affect even the financial institutions the way that most people are concerned. So I think we're off of the idea of it's going to be a global economic financial crisis, but there is still a lot of concern. Like, I don't know what the impact of isolating an entire country that supplies a lot of oil to Europe, and as a result, it impacts us indirectly. And so that's what we're seeing. The market is trying to figure out how big is the impact of the Russian sanctions on the rest of the economies. And when they make that decision, then they're going to be able to build it into the cake, and then eventually you'll start building back up from there. The long story short is you wouldn't want to say, well, I'm just going to leave the market entirely until all of this calms down, because the reality is there's still lots of great opportunities for you in your portfolio. And more times than not, if you just look at like time in the market and the data when that's concerned, it says if you end up missing like the best 5 days out of the last, 20 years, that you end up having like a break in even or even a negative return on your investments, that you really can't time the market. That it's more sensible for you to keep putting money in different sectors. So for example, we talked about Bitcoin going up. There are also other sectors where people are saying, okay, well, like energy, for example, right? If we're going to be decreasing the oil that you're going to be getting from Russia, well, then who are we going to increase our oil purchases from? And then in that case, can I get their stocks? And the answer is yes, you could. Also, if we're going into conflicts and wars, doesn't it also make sense to invest in defense companies, right? Like Lockheed Martin. And the answer, of course, is yes. Lockheed Martin is also up close to 10% on look at the macroeconomic view. There are certain conditions that will be met where you'll say, okay, if war is going on, who would benefit from war? And that's going to be the defense contractors. If you're worried about, the Russian ruble not being, tradable and you significantly losing your value, well, where are people going to put their money? Well, people are going to put their money in Bitcoin. And so you start looking at these and you start saying, okay, well, then what would happen if this happened? And then you may research that and you look into that, and then you can start investing in some of those sectors. And now, granted, the most important aspect is still going to be making sure that you maintain your diversification. I assume that you're not interested in just reading all of this data every day, all day, so that you can constantly be making the different changes. But as long as you just have a pulse on it, right? You have a general idea, and then you're diversified in these industries, then you should be fine. More times than not, as long as you are diversified in the sense that I have what I would consider stocks and industries that go up when the market is doing great and the economy is doing spectacular. And I also have some stocks that do great when the market is going down and the economy necessarily isn't that great. But there are certain things that people do invest more in. And right, food is one of them. People are very excited about food. Also, people end up dealing with like used cars a little bit more when the economies go bad. We're not buying new cars as much. Alcohol when the economy is going down. And so there are just certain things that end up happening that's pretty consistent. And as long as you can kind of map out what that looks like, then you should be fine as far as you staying in the market and being just riding it out. Because if you think of it in the sense that I'm choosing great companies, I'm very comfortable with the companies that I have, and it makes sense for me to keep investing in them, well, now you're just buying companies at a discount, which is a great situation for you to be in. There aren't many industries where if I told you, for instance, right, let's say a Tesla is like $100,000, and I told you, hey, I got a Tesla for $1,000. Are you interested? Most of you are going to say, you know what, even if it's not in the best condition, I think that's a really great deal. I'm going to get it because I can invest in fixing the car up, and I'm still going to be doing better off than if I bought it brand new. Sometimes the stock market is just like that, where you're going to be able to say, and sometimes the stock market is just like that, where you're going to be able to say, hey, look, this is an amazing deal. This is a great company. And just because the economic conditions surrounding it makes the stock go down, it doesn't mean that it's any less valuable in the long term. So then you should be very comfortable investing and purchasing stocks in great companies, even if they're going down, which I know it goes against like human nature, but if you really think about it, our goal is always to buy low and sell high. So if you are buying when something is going down, that is the only opportunity you really have to buy low. If you're buying like, let's say like an Amazon or Apple as they're going up and they're at all times highs, well, then you're realistically, you're buying high. Now, if you hold it long enough, most likely it'll get higher and they'll keep growing. They're great companies who make great decisions with the money that they have. But you also want to make sure that you just understand that your goal, generally speaking, is to buy low and sell high. Now, it doesn't mean that everything always works out, right? Stock market has a real risk of losing money, but just understand that even though the market lost 167 points today, it doesn't mean that every single stock lost money. It just means that a lot of the financial industries aren't certain about what's going on, and as a result, they lost a decent amount of money, and then just the market as a whole, where there's a lot of uncertainty and confusion of just what this will look like. So when you're making your retirement decision, remember, it's long term. So as long as you are comfortable with the choices that you're making, you should be very comfortable with the, waiting it out, riding it out, waiting for things to work through. Now, granted, you should always have an exit strategy in place if something changes in the economy that affects the company in a way that maybe your timeline doesn't allow you to wait it out. Well, then you'll just make that decision when it makes the most sense for you. If you have any additional retirement questions or have any additional assistance that you need, you can always check out my free retirement plan that works video training at obsidianwisdom.com/training. In it, I give you the entire wisdometric framework that I use with my clients to help them eradicate financial stress, generate passive income, and build a prosperous retirement strategy. Until next time, Wisdomites, remember, wisdom is asking the right questions to allow yourself to get the right answers. Keep asking those questions and you will keep getting those answers. Continue blessings.